Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily English Lab podcast. Wait, stop studying grammar the way your textbooks taught you. What if I told you that literally every single native English speaker breaks at least 5 major grammar rules every single day? And the craziest part? They sound completely natural and correct doing it. You've been grinding through lessons about perfect grammar. You've memorized every rule. You've corrected yourself 1,000 times. But here's what nobody tells you. Real English isn't found in grammar textbooks. It's found in coffee shops, in casual conversations, in text messages, and in the way native speakers actually communicate. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to reveal the exact 5 grammar rules that professional English speakers break constantly. And by the end of this video, you'll understand not just what they do, but why they do it, because this changes everything about how you learn English. So stick around, because this is going to transform the way you speak English forever. I'm so glad you're here. For those of you who are new, this channel is dedicated to helping you sound more natural, more confident, and more like an actual native speaker instead of someone reciting rules from a textbook. Now, let me be really honest with you. I've been teaching English for over 8 years now, and I've noticed something fascinating. The students who improve the fastest aren't the ones who memorize every grammar rule perfectly. They're the ones who understand how real native speakers actually use English in the real world. And here's the thing that changed my entire teaching approach. Native speakers break grammar rules all the time. When I first realized this, I was shocked. I went back and listened to podcasts, interviews, casual conversations, and even TED Talks. And you know what I found? Everywhere. Grammar rule violations everywhere. But they sounded perfect. They sounded natural. They sounded correct. That's when it hit me. These aren't mistakes. These are patterns. These are the real rules of English that nobody's teaching you. So here's what we're covering in the next 25 minutes. We're going deep into 5 specific grammar rules that native speakers consistently break. For each one, I'm going to show you exactly when and why they break it, what it sounds like, and most importantly, how you can start using these patterns naturally in your own speech. By the time this video is done, you're going to understand that breaking these grammar rules isn't wrong. It's actually how English works in real life. This is going to make you sound more fluent, more confident, and way more like an actual native speaker instead of someone reciting rules from a textbook. Before we jump in, I want to know, what's your biggest challenge right now with English grammar? Are you confused about verb tenses, worried about word order, nervous about sounding unnatural? Drop a comment below and let me know what brought you here today. I read every single comment, and I love seeing what you're working on. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button. It really helps me create more content like this. Plus, if you subscribe right now, you'll get notified every time I upload a new lesson. And trust me, you don't want to miss the next one. All right, let's get into the first rule that's about to change everything. So, rule number 1. When you were in school, your English teacher probably hammered this into your brain. Never start a sentence with and, but, or because. Am I right? I can practically hear your teacher's voice right now saying those words. Those words are for connecting independent clauses within a sentence, not for starting one. But here's what nobody told you. This is completely outdated advice, and native speakers break this rule constantly. Think of it this way. That rule was made up in the 1800s by grammar gatekeepers who wanted to sound sophisticated. Today, it's everywhere in real English. Movies, podcasts, professional writing, text messages, everywhere. Let me give you some real examples. Listen to this conversation. I wanted to go to the meeting yesterday, but the weather was terrible, so I stayed home. Native speaker? Absolutely. Would your textbook approve? Probably not, but it sounds completely natural because it is. Here's another one. We tried calling the customer service line 5 times, and every single time we got put on hold for 20 minutes. That "and" starting the second sentence, it creates emphasis and flow. It's actually more interesting than if we'd combined them with a comma. Here's why native speakers do this. When you start a sentence with a conjunction, you're creating what we call rhetorical emphasis. You're giving weight to what comes next. You're saying, this is important. Pay attention. Compare these two versions. Version 1, the meeting was canceled because the speaker got sick. Version 2, the meeting was canceled because the speaker got sick and we have to reschedule for next month. That "and" landing at the beginning of the sentence forces you to tune in. Psychologically, it makes what follows seem more significant. I remember when I really understood this rule. I was listening to a podcast with a super famous language expert, and she said something like, people struggle with this for years, and the whole time they're ignoring one of the most powerful tools in the English language. That stuck with me. She was using this rule intentionally. She was using it to communicate more effectively. Now, here's what learners get wrong about this. They think that every time you see a conjunction, you have to use it. So they start writing things like, I went to the store, and I bought milk, and I bought eggs, and I bought bread. See the problem? It becomes repetitive and annoying. That's not how native speakers use this rule. Native speakers use it strategically, maybe once or twice in a paragraph, not constantly. The real rule is this. Use conjunctions at the start of sentences for emphasis, for rhythm, or to create a contrast, but don't overuse them or they lose their power. I want you to take a moment and write down 2 sentences. First, write them the textbook correct way. Connect them with a comma. Then rewrite them, starting the second sentence with but or and. Which one sounds more natural to you? Which one gets your attention more? Try it right now. Pause this video and write those sentences. I'll wait. Welcome back. Feel the difference? That's the difference between grammatically correct and actually natural English. Drop a comment and let me know which rule you were taught that you always thought was weird. I bet you've been dying to break some of these rules your whole life. All right, rule number 1 is going to help you sound way more fluid. But here's the thing. Rule number 2, this one is even more surprising because it's about something everybody uses wrong. Rule number 2, sentence fragments. Your teacher told you every sentence needs a subject and a verb, right? Every sentence needs to be complete. Well, native speakers break this rule constantly, and they do it on purpose. A sentence fragment is a sentence that's missing a subject or a verb. For example, absolutely incredible. That's not a complete sentence. But if I say, I just watched the most amazing movie, absolutely incredible, that's how native speakers actually talk. Here's another one. Really? That's a fragment. But in conversation, you hear it all the time. Someone says something and someone else responds with just, really? Complete fragment, completely natural. When my friend Sarah got engaged last year, I asked her how it happened, and she literally said, so there we were at the beach, sunset, perfect lighting, and he just dropped to one knee. That sentence, sunset, perfect lighting, those are fragments. But that's exactly how people tell stories. They use fragments for dramatic effect, for pacing, for emphasis. Here's why native speakers use fragments strategically. They create rhythm, they create emphasis, they make your listener wait just a tiny bit, and that wait makes your message stick more. Think about advertising. Have you ever noticed how advertisements love using fragments? Just do it. Fragment. Impossible is nothing. Fragment. Open happiness. Fragment. These are billion-dollar companies using fragments because they know fragments work. They're powerful, they're memorable, they're how humans actually communicate when they're being authentic. In writing, there are rules. Complete sentences are usually required. But in speaking, in real, natural English, fragments are everywhere, and they sound more natural than complete sentences sometimes. Here's what learners get wrong.
They think every fragment is wrong. They hear a native speaker say, "not really a good time," and they automatically correct it mentally to, "it's not really a good time." But here's the thing, that correction takes away the naturalness. The original fragment sounds more casual, more real, more like how people actually talk. Let me give you some real examples of how native speakers use fragments. 1. Should I try it? Sure, why not? Nothing to lose. 2. How's your day going? Amazing. Seriously. Best day in weeks. 3. What happened at the meeting? Chaos. Total chaos. Nobody was prepared. Notice how much more natural that sounds than it was total chaos and nobody was prepared. Here's how to remember this. Fragments aren't mistakes. Fragments are choices. When you use a fragment, you're choosing emphasis over perfection. And that's advanced English right there. Pause the video. I want you to write one response to a question using only fragments. For example, if someone asks, "How was your weekend?" instead of answering with a full sentence like, "It was really good," try saying, "Amazing. Got to sleep in, went hiking, perfect weather." Do that right now. Write a response using fragments. This is going to train your ear for more natural English. Comment below with your fragment response. I want to see how you do this. And don't worry about it being grammatically correct. In this case, incorrect is actually perfect. All right, so we've covered starting sentences with conjunctions and using fragments, but rule number 3, this one affects basically every conversation you have in English, and I guarantee you're doing it wrong right now. Okay, rule number 3 is something you probably do all the time, but you might feel weird about it in certain situations. Contractions. I'm talking about things like I'm, can't, won't, there. Now, technically, contractions aren't against the rules, but here's what's wild. Learners are often taught that contractions are informal or casual and that you shouldn't use them in formal writing or speaking. And you know what? That's partially true. But here's the part nobody tells you. Native speakers use contractions in basically every situation except the most formal writing. And even then, they're creeping in. Native speakers use contractions in business presentations, in interviews, in professional emails, everywhere. Here's why. Contractions are how humans naturally speak. When we talk, we compress words together. It's efficient, it's natural, it's how English flows. I had a student named Marco who was terrified of contractions in his job interviews. He thought they made him sound unprofessional. So in his interviews, he'd say things like, "I am excited to be here. I will bring a lot of value. I cannot wait to start." Marco sounded robotic. He sounded stiff. He didn't get the job. 6 months later, he tried again with a different company. This time, I coached him to use contractions naturally. "I'm excited to be here. I'll bring a lot of value. I can't wait to start." Different energy. Completely different. He got that job. The only thing that changed was the contractions.
The pattern is this. When you avoid contractions completely, you sound formal to the point of being weird. When you use them naturally, you sound like yourself. And people trust people who sound like themselves. Here's what learners get wrong. They think formal means no contractions. So they write emails or give presentations and say things like, "I will follow up with you," instead of "I'll follow up with you." The funny thing? Both are correct, but one sounds like a human being and one sounds like a robot reading from a script. Let me give you some real examples of how native speakers use contractions naturally. In a casual conversation, "I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right, I shouldn't have reacted that way." In a business meeting, we've analyzed the data and it's showing that we'll need to adjust our strategy. Aren't there some options we haven't explored? In a formal presentation, we're looking at some interesting trends. They've changed how we think about this market. Won't this affect how we move forward?
In every single one of those situations, a native speaker uses contractions. It's not casual, it's normal. Here's how to think about this. If you wouldn't say it without the contraction in real life, don't write it without the contraction. Use contractions when they feel natural. And here's the secret. They almost always feel natural. Pause this video. I want you to write 3 sentences about your day. Write them first without any contractions. Then rewrite them with contractions. Read both versions out loud. Which one sounds like you? Which one sounds like how you actually talk? Go ahead and do that now. I'll wait. Perfect. You just experienced the difference between textbook English and real English. That's what this whole video is about. Have you ever felt weird using contractions? Comment below and tell me what made you hesitate. I bet a lot of people have the exact same worry you do. All right, contractions are going to make you sound so much more natural. But rule number 4 is about something even more fundamental. How you use present perfect tense. And this one is going to blow your mind because native speakers almost never use it the way your textbook taught you. Rule number 4 is about verb tenses, and I want you to really pay attention here because this is one of the biggest mistakes I see learners making. Your textbook probably taught you that present perfect is for actions that started in the past and continue to the present, right? So you learned that you should say, I have lived in this city for 5 years, not I lived in this city for 5 years. And that's technically true. But here's what's wild. Native speakers break this rule all the time, and it depends on where they're from. Did you know that American English speakers and British English speakers use present perfect completely differently? This is one of those hidden patterns that nobody teaches you. British speakers tend to follow that textbook rule pretty strictly. They'll say, have you eaten yet? American speakers are way more likely to say, did you eat yet? Same meaning, same situation, different grammar rule. I have a friend Emma from London and a friend Jake from California, and I watched them have this conversation, and it was hilarious. Emma asked Jake, have you been to Paris? Jake said, yeah, I went there 3 years ago. Emma looked confused because she would have said something like, have you gone to Paris? Or asked it differently. But here's the thing. Jake sounded completely natural. To American ears, he sounded perfect. He was breaking the textbook rule, but he was following the American English rule perfectly. Here's why this matters. If you're learning American English, you need to understand that Americans actually use simple past in situations where textbooks say you should use present perfect. American, I lost my keys somewhere. British, I've lost my keys somewhere. American, I didn't go to the party last night. British, I haven't been to the party last night. Same action, different tense, both correct, depending on your context. Here's what learners get wrong. They learn one version of the present perfect rule and apply it everywhere. Then they sound unnatural because they're speaking like a textbook instead of like an actual human from an actual place. The mistake isn't using simple past. The mistake is not understanding that where you are matters. What country, what dialect, what context. These things change the rules. Let me give you 3 real examples. Example 1. I've worked here for 3 years. That's classic present perfect, textbook correct. But an American might just as easily say, I worked here for 3 years, and it's equally natural. Example 2, someone asks, have you seen my phone? British speaker would naturally say that. American speaker might say, did you see my phone? Same question, different grammar, but both are correct and both sound natural to native ears. The big takeaway here is this. There's not just one correct way to use present perfect. There are regional variations, and understanding these variations makes you sound more like an actual native speaker from a specific place instead of sounding like a textbook. Pause the video. I want you to think about which variety of English you're learning. American, British, Australian, or something else. Now think of a sentence about something you did in the past. Write it using present perfect, then rewrite it using simple past. Then listen to which one sounds more natural to you based on the English you hear most often. Do that now. Compare your 2 sentences. You're doing great. You're starting to understand the patterns beneath the rules. Which English variety are you learning? American, British, Australian, or something else? Comment below and tell me because I want to know if there are specific regional patterns you want me to cover in future videos. All right, so we've covered conjunctions, fragments, contractions, and tense variations. But rule number 5, this is the grand finale. This is about something native speakers do constantly, something so common you probably haven't even noticed it. And once you start noticing it, you'll hear it everywhere.
Rule number 5 is about subject-verb agreement, and this is going to sound weird when I explain it, but I promise it makes sense. You learned this rule. A singular subject takes a singular verb. A plural subject takes a plural verb. Simple, right? So you learned to say, the team is playing well. But here's what you probably haven't noticed. Native speakers say, the team are playing well all the time, especially British speakers. This is a legitimate pattern in English, and it's called notional agreement, which is just a fancy way of saying native speakers sometimes make the verb agree with the meaning rather than the grammatical form. Here's how it works. Even though team is grammatically singular, it represents multiple people. So sometimes native speakers treat it like it's plural and say are instead of is. Think about it. Our family are going on vacation. Technically, family is singular, so it should be is. But families are made of multiple people. So are also makes sense. This happens constantly in British English, less commonly in American English. But both are correct depending on context. This is one of those hidden rules that native speakers know intuitively but aren't consciously thinking about. I remember hearing a cricket commentator on BBC Radio say, the Australian team are looking stronger than they were last year. That's British English in action. In America, you'd more likely hear, the Australian team is looking stronger. Neither is wrong. They're just different patterns, and understanding that these patterns exist makes you understand English at a deeper level. Here's where this really matters. Collective nouns like team, group, family, class, government, audience. In British English, these often take plural verbs when you're thinking about the individual members in the group. In American English, they usually take singular verbs. British, the government are taking action. American, the government is taking action. Both are correct. Context and dialect determine which one you use. Here's what learners get wrong. They learn the rule in one form and don't realize it has variations. They might hear a native speaker say, the staff are taking a lunch break, and think it's a mistake instead of recognizing it as a legitimate pattern. Let me give you some real examples. Example 1. Our committee are divided on this issue. Sounds odd if you're thinking purely grammatically, but it's how native speakers talk when they're thinking about the people in the committee. Example 2. The audience are on their feet. Again, grammatically questionable, but the speaker is thinking about the individual people in the audience, not the concept of a single audience. Example 3. My team is preparing the presentation. This is more American. Same sentence in British English might be, my team are preparing the presentation. Here's how to think about it. When you're thinking about the group as individual members, plural verbs work. When you're thinking about the group as a unit, singular verbs work. Both are right depending on perspective and dialect. British English is more flexible with this rule, treats collectives as plural more often. American English is stricter, treats collectives as singular more consistently. Pause the video. I want you to write one sentence with a collective noun. For example, a sentence about your class, your family, or your company. Write it twice, once with a singular verb and once with a plural verb. Which one feels more natural to you? Go ahead, write those sentences right now. Perfect. You just understood something that most learners never figure out. You now know that English has variations and options, and that's where real fluency comes from. Which of these 5 rules surprised you the most? Honestly, I want to know.
Comment below and tell me which one changed how you think about English. And if there's a specific grammar rule that confuses you, mention it in the comments. I'm planning future videos, and your questions help me decide what to teach next. All right, we've covered 5 major rules that native speakers break, but I want to make sure you're not going to be confused about when to break these rules and when to follow them. So let's dive into some common mistakes that happen when people learn about these patterns. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to address 3 critical mistakes I see learners make when they discover that native speakers break grammar rules. Mistake number 1, thinking that all grammar rules don't matter. I've had students watch videos like this and then think, great, I can just write whatever I want. No, that's not what this means. Yes, native speakers break these 5 rules, but they break them strategically, intentionally, and in appropriate contexts. Breaking a grammar rule to sound more natural is completely different from breaking a grammar rule because you don't understand it. Here's the distinction. When you use "and" to start a sentence, you're doing it for rhetorical effect. You understand the rule you're breaking. You're choosing to break it. That's advanced English. When you don't use a contraction just because you don't know contractions exist, that's not advanced. That's just confusion. Mistake number 2, applying these rules everywhere without considering context. These patterns work in casual speaking and conversational writing. In formal academic papers? No. In professional legal documents? Probably not. In job interviews? Depends on the vibe, but proceed with caution. Context matters. Your audience matters. The situation matters. Native speakers understand this intuitively. You need to start thinking about it consciously. I had a student who learned about starting sentences with conjunctions and then did it 17 times in a formal essay for university. His professor commented, "This is creative, but it's not appropriate for academic writing." He was using the rule in the wrong context. Don't make that mistake. These rules are for natural speech and casual writing, not for every situation. Mistake number 3, forgetting that grammar rules exist for clarity. These 5 rules work because they make communication clearer, more natural, or more emphatic. But breaking a rule makes you unclear or confuses your listener, then you've broken it for the wrong reasons. Break rules to sound natural. Break rules for emphasis. Break rules to communicate better. Don't break rules just because you learned you could break them. That's the nuance. That's what separates people who sound like native speakers from people who just sound confused. All right, let's recap what you've learned today. Here are the 5 grammar rules that native speakers break constantly. Rule 1, starting sentences with conjunctions like and, but, or because. Native speakers do this for emphasis and rhythm. It sounds natural and gets your attention. Rule 2, using sentence fragments. Incomplete sentences are everywhere in real English. They create emphasis and make your communication more compelling and authentic. Rule 3, using contractions everywhere. Not just casual speaking. Business, interviews, professional communication. Contractions make you sound natural, and that builds trust. Rule 4, present perfect versus simple past variations. These change depending on whether you're speaking American or British English. Understanding these variations helps you sound like actual people from actual places. Rule 5, subject-verb agreement with collective nouns. Plural verbs sometimes make sense for collective nouns, especially in British English, because we're thinking about the people in the group, not the group as a single unit. Here's the most important thing to remember. These aren't exceptions. These are patterns. These are how language actually works when real people are communicating. Learning these patterns is what takes you from textbook English to real-world English, from sounding like a learner to sounding like a native speaker. You now know secrets about English that most textbooks don't even teach. Use them wisely. You made it to the end of this video, and that means you're serious about improving your English. I respect that so much. Here's my challenge for you. This week, I want you to notice these patterns. Listen to native speakers, podcasts, movies, conversations, interviews. When you hear someone start a sentence with but, pay attention. When you hear a fragment, notice it. When you hear contractions in formal situations, remember that. You're training your ear to recognize these patterns, and that's how fluency develops. If this video helped you, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel because I'm making videos on grammar, pronunciation, speaking confidence, and everything in between. And please comment below. Tell me which rule surprised you most. Tell me what grammar confuses you. Your comments help me create videos that actually help you. Tomorrow, I'm covering something that blows people's minds: the way native speakers actually use articles. We're talking about when you use the and when you don't. And it's way more nuanced than you think. You don't want to miss that. So until next time, keep speaking, keep practicing, and remember, perfect grammar doesn't create perfect communication. Natural, authentic communication creates real connection. I'll see you in the next video.